In my previous video and in my popular post on the Elden Ring Lore Talk Reddit, I postulated that Radagon is the true villain behind the events of the Shattering, the series of historical events that caused Queen Marika the Eternal to shatter the Elden Ring and trigger a series of wars between the demigods. In Norse mythology, a similar event occurs called Ragnarok, and it's all triggered by the machinations of Loki, a guardian of Asgard, the pantheon of the gods. Loki also just happens to be the trickster god, the literal god of deception, and the cause of many of Asgard's problems. When summarized in full, understanding the complete story of Loki should cause any Elden Ring player to say, that sounds familiar, because, as I elaborated in my previous video, Loki bears some striking similarities to Radagon. I will link my previous video in the description if you want to watch it, but I'll quickly list here the main similarities between Radagon and Loki, and hopefully you'll agree with me. There are many. Both are related to giants. Both married giant women. Both conceived 3 children with giant women who turned into monsters. Both Loki and Radagon may have shapeshifted and sired children with monsters. Both left their respective giant women and returned to the pantheon of the gods to marry a goddess. Both had 2 more ill-fated children with their new wives. My previous video goes into a lot more detail on each of these points, so do watch it if you have the time. The main difference in the respective stories of Loki and Radagon is that Loki became jealous of Balder and arranged for his death by exploiting a loophole in his godly vulnerability. Balder was the most beautiful and beloved of the gods, made immortal by his mother Frigg, who made everything in the universe promise not to hurt Balder, except for mistletoe. Loki shapeshifted into an old woman and cast a spell on Frigg to make her divulge this information. He then fashioned a spear out of mistletoe and deceived another god, the blind god Hodor, into throwing it at Balder, killing him. In Elden Ring, Ranni the Witch claims responsibility for a similar event, wherein she stole a fragment of the Rune of Death, which had been plucked from the Elden Ring by Queen Marika to make all her demigod children immortal, consequently blocking destined death for everyone in the lands between. Ranni forged the Black Knives and imbued them with the power of the Rune of Death, making them weapons capable of slaying a god. However, Ranni's story has some holes in it. The death of Marika's most beautiful and beloved son, Godwyn the Golden, is carried out by the Black Knife assassins, who were all women of the Nox, from Nokron, the Eternal City. But through her questline, Ranni demonstrates that she has no idea how to enter Nokron, and neither do any of her minions like Blythe, Iji, or Seluvus. Only by speaking to Sorceress Selin at the Waypoint Ruins do we learn that the hidden entrance to Nokron will be revealed by slaying Ranni's brother, General Radagon the Star Scourge. Ranni isn't aware of any of this. So then, how did Ranni enter Nokron, recruit the Black Knife assassins, or supply them with the weapons they used to kill Godwyn? At the Three Sisters, there is a portal to Nokstella, Eternal City, hidden in Rena's Rise. Some theorize that this is how Ranni communicates with the Nox and the Black Knife assassins. But in the game, this tower remains mysteriously blocked off by a blank seal until the Tarnished uses the Carrion inverted statue at the Carrion Study Hall and accesses the Divine Tower of Liurnia. This makes it unclear whether Ranni had prior access to Rena's Rise and the portal to Nokstella. We find miniature Ranni after teleporting to the Ainsel River main area, a short distance away from Nokstella. By the way, if we speak to this doll repeatedly, then Ranni tells us everything, because according to her, taking a miniature form hath loosened her tongue. But among all her admissions of guilt, she doesn't take responsibility for Godwyn's death. She doesn't even mention him at all, nor does she confess why he was the target of her plot, because perhaps he wasn't. My previous video theorizes that with so many similarities between Loki's and Radagon's backstories, and Loki's direct involvement in Balder's death, it is entirely possible that Radagon has some connection to the Knight of the Black Knives and Godwyn's death. Given the plot holes apparent in Ranni's recounting of her role in the events, my theory is that Radagon is likely the true architect of the death of Godwyn the Golden. Today, I am returning to this theory again, but this time with documentation from within the game. This documentation will include item description text as well as deep dives into the lore of certain locations in the lands between, which when combined, prove my theory that Radagon is tied directly to the death of Godwyn the Golden. The Artist Shacks are some of the most mysterious places in Elden Ring. They stand abandoned, falling apart in most cases. There are no NPCs around to explain them, but there are also no enemies nearby. They are odd places with odd vibes, avoided by everything in the lands between. The only person courageous or perhaps stupid enough to venture to these places is the Tarnished. The Artist Shack in Limgrave is the first one we are likely to come across in our journey. It houses the Homing Instinct painting, making this likely the first painting we find. This painting is the work of a wandering artist, said to have captured the landscape scene during the last moments of those welcomed into death's embrace. The soul of the painter and vestiges of the dead's last moments can be discovered by visiting the locations depicted even now. The artwork depicts an actual location in Limgrave, where the soul of the painting's artist briefly appears and points to the Church of Pilgrimage and the minor Erd Tree on the Weeping Peninsula. The artist drops the Incantation Scarab, an item worn like a mask over the face, which reduces the FP cost of incantations but increases the damage taken. The description ends with, as a scarab approaches death, it abandons its rolled treasure and stretches its wings wide for the long journey to its home nest. This is one way of explaining the painting's title. However, the mention of the scarab's death is interesting, partly because of what we find in the region the artist points to, which I'll elaborate on momentarily, but also because the Incantation Scarab is one of 5 similar masks. The Incantation Scarab is the only one of these items with a third paragraph of description, a paragraph that leaves us with the final impression of flying toward the area the artist was pointing towards. If one stands in the artist's position and faces the same direction, one can draw a straight line down the map and connect 2 locations, the Church of Pilgrimage and the Tombsward Catacombs, directly below the minor Erd Tree of the Weeping Peninsula. Many Elden Ring lore theorists and websites believe the Homing Instinct painting is referring specifically to the Tower of Return in the Weeping Peninsula, because a teleporter chest is located here, one that transports the player to the Divine Tower Bridge in Lanedale, Royal Capital. Though entirely credible, this theory doesn't add up, because the artist who drops the Incantation Scarab is pointing directly south, whereas the Tower of Return is located farther to the southwest. The Incantation Scarab being gold might also be significant. Incantations include a wide range of faith-based spells, including those of the Crucible, the Erd Tree and the Golden Order fundamentalists, Dragon Cult and Dragon Communion incantations, Bestial incantations, Blood Oath, Frenzied Flame, and even Godslayer incantations. Therefore, the color of the Incantation Scarab could have been any of a range of colors from white to yellow, orange, or dark red, but it is specifically gold in color, matching the Golden Order, or quite possibly matching Godwyn the Golden. The reason I say this is because of what we find if we explore the area the artist pointed at. Traveling on horseback to the area, we are likely to come across the Church of Pilgrimage first. Before we arrive there, we are likely to encounter a group of wandering nobles, or pilgrims, traveling to the church. For a long time, I believe these nobles were here to explain the name of the church. However, I now believe this may be misdirection. There may be another reason for the name relating to the exile of Godfrey and the Tarnished. By resting at the site of grace at the Church of Pilgrimage, we can optionally hear spoken echoes of Queen Marika recited by Melina. The words appear to be a continuation of the speech that Marika started at the Third Church, where she told Godfrey and the Golden Army that they would become tarnished, be driven from the lands between, wage war in a land afar, and die.
Then, after thy death, I will give back what I once claimed, return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden ring. Grow strong in the face of death. Warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey.
With these words, Marika is foretelling the future, also known as prediction or prophecy. Keep this word in mind for later. This church was probably the last stop of Godfrey and the Golden Army before they left the lands between. The ships that the Tarnished likely sailed in left from the beaches on the southwest edge of the continent. Several of these ships didn't make it far, however, as many of them are wrecked just offshore by some unknown calamity that struck them on departure. Inside the Church of Pilgrimage, we see that this is one of the churches where Radagon has replaced the usual statue of Marika with his own likeness. We discussed in my previous video how Radagon had his own separate personality from Marika, how he wanted to be worshipped and to be a god like her, and how Marika even acknowledged this in her spoken echoes that Melina recites in her bedchamber in Leyndell. Below Radagon's statue we find a scarlet tear. But just to the right, we can find 5 golden centipedes. This item is described as kept as a fetish by Golden Order fundamentalists, especially the hunters of those who live in death. One such hunter of those who live in death is D, Hunter of the Dead, who we can meet outside Summonwater Village. If we speak to him again after defeating the Tibia Mariner located there, he details why these items are so important to hunters like himself.
I spotted the mark of the centipede here in the village. An ill-omened symbol that should not be. Someone or something threatens the sanctity of the Golden Order and must be eradicated.
So, for hunters like D, the golden centipede represents the presence of those who live in death and a threat to the Golden Order. We do not find any golden centipedes here ourselves, but we can assume that D already found and collected them. What we do find here are these strange roots with eyes and insectile spines. The Tibia Mariner encountered in Summonwater Village, and all the others throughout the game, drop an item called Death Root. This item's description has the following third paragraph. On the night of the dire plot, the stolen rune of death enabled the first death of a demigod. Later, the rune of death spread across the lands between through the underground roots of the Great Tree, sprouting in the form of Deathroot. So, although we must search elsewhere for the connection, the golden centipedes at the Church of Pilgrimage are connected to those who live in death and Deathroot. If we wander outside the Church of Pilgrimage to the west, we find a graveyard from which arise those who live in death. Now we understand why the golden centipedes are found here. But why are those who live in death interested in this church, where spoken echoes indicate Marika relayed a prophecy to her Lord Godfrey and her golden army? Why does it seem like those who live in death are attempting to take over this church, where Radagon is prominently featured? More items of interest appear in the graveyard, including the gilded iron shield, looted from a corpse sitting on top of a grave. As the description reads, though the gold leaf is peeling and the effect is slight, it still boosts holy damage negation. Those who live in death are weak against holy damage, and so this shield would be perfect for one of the undead. In my opinion, this particular shield being found at this particular spot is hinting at the concept of protecting those who live in death. A concept we'll hear more about later in the game from Fia the Deathbed Companion, who is on a quest deeply tied to Godwyn the Golden. Also in this graveyard, a single crucifix is erected, where a single unfortunate tarnished hangs, beneath whom a blood grease lies on the ground. Blood grease is crafted from a combination of blood rose and root resin, which has the following description: secreted from the roots of the great tree, but can also be found near trees on the surface. The roots of the great tree were once linked to those of the Erd Tree, or so they say, and it is for this reason catacombs are built around great tree roots. As stated earlier, the soul of the painter of the Homing Instinct painting also points us toward the minor Erd Tree in Weeping Peninsula. Under this Erd Tree is the Tombsward Catacombs, in which we encounter many of those who live in death. We can also find a large amount of Deathroot on the walls and ceilings, and upon defeating the Cemetery Shade boss inside a chamber full of great tree roots, we receive the spirit ashes of Lutel the Headless, leader of the Mausoleum soldiers who protect the nearby Walking Mausoleum, which houses another one of the other demigods killed on the Night of the Black Knives, referred to by the spirit at the Church of Pilgrimage as Marika's unwanted child. Interesting fact, the southern doorway of the Church of Pilgrimage aligns almost perfectly with the entrance of the Tombsward Catacombs. If the land were more even, you could walk straight from the church into the tomb. On a stone column just west of the minor Erdtree in the Tombsward Catacombs, we find a corpse holding the Eclipse Crest Heater Shield, a medium-sized metal shield that bears the symbol of the eclipse, and the following description. The sun in eclipse is said to be the symbol of the wandering mausoleum where the soulless demigods slumber. But this body doesn't face the wandering mausoleum. It faces the fourth church of Marika. The only unique feature of this church is that it is always guarded by mausoleum soldiers. If you knock down the nearby Walking Mausoleum and stop its endless pacing, the mausoleum soldiers in the valley all vanish, no longer bound to their eternal duty to protect the demigod within. However, at the fourth church, these soldiers still stand guard here, and another trio patrols the dirt path to the church. They are actively protecting this church, where a statue of Marika still stands. Why do they protect this church and not the Walking Mausoleum? And why would Radagon replace the Marika statue in the Church of Pilgrimage and not this one? The only other church on the Weeping Peninsula, only a short distance away. Are the Mausoleum Knights posted here on special duty, trying to prevent the same sacrilegious statue replacement that already occurred at the nearby Church of Pilgrimage? Or are they trying to prevent the spread of those who live in death, in the way that Godwyn's followers have already spread to the Church of Pilgrimage, surrounding it with gravestones from which they emerge, golden centipedes, and other items vaguely tied to the story of Godwyn? But the corpse holding the Eclipse Crest Heater Shield might not be looking at this church. They could instead be looking at the Weeping Everjail beside the fourth church. Inside this Everjail is an ancient hero of Zamor, a boss version of a knight of Zamor, commonly encountered in the mountaintops of the Giants, far to the north. These knights were said to have been enemies of the fire giants, and likely would have accompanied Godfrey and Marika, who is also Radagon, on their march north to defeat the fire giants. When defeated, this enemy drops the Radagon Scar Seal, which many theorize is the actual eye of King Consort Radagon himself, representing his lifelong duty as one chosen by the gods. Why is this ancient hero of the Golden Order's war against the giants imprisoned on the Weeping Peninsula in an Everjail, a device which is quite clearly derived from the magic technology of the Eternal Cities? Why is he carrying a totem of Lord Radagon that might be one of his actual eyes? What great crime did this ancient hero commit? What offense might he have given Lord Radagon to wind up here? The eclipse in Elden Ring is a vague concept that won't be revealed in full until we later reach Castle Sol, which just happens to be in the mountaintops of the Giants, home of the aforementioned Knights of Zamor. The eclipse is the symbol of Castle Sol, represented on its banners, but according to the talking spirits within Castle Sol, the eclipse also indicates either the timing or the nature of a ceremony Miquella conducted at Castle Sol to restore the soul of a demigod slumbering in the Walking Mausoleum just outside. It's possible that if Miquella had been successful, that he would have discovered how to restore Godwyn's soul to his body and undo the curse mark carved into his back. But the eclipse failed. In Stormveil Castle, we encounter a spellblade named Sorcerer Rogier. We can summon him in the fight against Margit, the Fell Omen. Later, we can speak to him in a small church and learn glintstone battle arts from him. As we continue exploring, if we follow the upper level in the northwest part of the castle, we find a message left by Rogier that includes a hologram. Rogier is standing facing southeast, back into the castle. His message states that we can find find what we're looking for nearby. However, this might not be a message to us. This might be Rogier leaving a note for himself. Because if we draw a straight line in the direction he is facing, we can see that he is looking directly at the artifact he is seeking under Stormveil Castle. In the burial chamber beneath Stormveil Castle, we encounter a lesser ulcerated tree spirit. In the area beyond this encounter, we find a bizarre-looking face with deathroot growing from it. If we stand on this face and match the angle of its eyes, we find ourselves looking at the location where Rogier left his message on the balcony. Nearby, we see a bloodstain. Something we usually see only in network mode, marking where other players have died, but this bloodstain also appears offline. When activated, it appears to show Rogier die in a manner that is consistent with Deathblight. This status effect also appears to have been wielded by Godwyn the Golden in life, as noted in the description of the Death Lightning Dragon Cult incantation. A corpse near the giant face can be looted to find the Prince of Death's pustule, an accessory that raises vitality and helps prevent deathblight. The second paragraph of this item's description reads, "It is said that this pustule came from the visage of the Prince of Death, he who used to be called Godwyn. As first dead of the demigods, it's said he's buried deep under the capital at the Erd Tree's roots." Indeed, much later in the game, we might have the opportunity to visit the Deeproot Depths, where another walking mausoleum prowls the nameless eternal city, where mausoleum knights and soldiers guard another slumbering demigod within, where we can ascend by riding along the great tree roots to the summit, where we find the massive corpse of Godwyn the Golden, now known as the Prince of Death, dead in soul but living in body, having grown into a grotesque monster fused to the Erd Tree roots, spreading deathroot to all corners of the world. His face now looks like a version of the face we see under Stormveil, confirming the deathroot growth Rogier discovered is indeed a manifestation of the Prince of Death. In a room in Stormveil that is sometimes easy to miss, we can find another large painting titled Prophecy. This room is located directly below the church where we first speak to Rogier, and it is guarded by a literal guard dog, as well as an omen, an enemy most commonly encountered in the sewers under Lanedale Royal Capital, where omen children are condemned to live out their lives, shunned away out of sight by the Golden Order, who despise anything with horns. Why is an omen from the capital slumbering here in Stormveil, with the only hound dog in the entire stage blocking access to a painting? But more importantly, the painting's title, Prophecy, refers directly to the Church of Pilgrimage, where we heard spoken echoes of America divulging a prophecy about how the Tarnished would return to the lands between. After viewing the painting and returning to the Church of Pilgrimage, we can go a little northwest of the structure to find the soul of the painter. He is looking northwest at Stormveil and the Chapel of Anticipation, where we, the Tarnished, first returned into the world when summoned by grace, and also where a visage of Godwyn, now Prince of Death, appears in the burial chamber far underground. The painter disappears, dropping the Warhawk ashes, which is the spirit of a Stormveil Warhawk. The description of this item states, "With its lord vanquished and its wings wounded, the hawk perished as it solemnly gazed at its former home." Unlike the incantation scarab, the Warhawk was unable to follow its homing instinct. But I think the real clue we're supposed to take from this is for us to return or fly back to Stormveil and look for more clues linking the evidence found around the Church of Pilgrimage to the visage of Godwyn in the burial chamber. So, now that I've been spitting facts at you for a while, what does it all mean? I think that From Software's Elden Ring, like Bloodborne and Dark Souls before it, favors environmental storytelling over long expository cutscenes. The history of Elden Ring has been shattered and fragmented, just like the Elden Ring, Marika, and Radagon, and the lands between. We can only find some of the pieces, and we must use clues from the various mythologies of our world as well as our imaginations to tie it all together. So, I'll tell you what I'm inclined to think. I think that by discovering the first artist shack in Limgrave, in the first area of the game, that we are finding the first breadcrumb in a trail of environmental clues, pointing us towards something we should investigate further. I think the first breadcrumb, a painting depicting a certain location, points us to the next breadcrumb, which is the soul of the painter pointing at the Church of Pilgrimage in the Weeping Peninsula, a church dominated by a Radagon statue, but surrounded by symbols of those who live in death, and a shield to protect them, as well as a symbol of root resin, leading us to the nearby Tombsward Catacombs, where we find the roots of the Great Tree, but also more signs of those who live in death, and Deathroot, a parasitic plant stemming from the very corpse of Godwyn, the Prince of Death, growing into the roots of the Erd Tree. And just outside this catacomb we find a shield bearing the crest of a movement, centered around restoring the souls of the slumbering demigods slain on the night of the Black Knives, like Godwyn. A shield whose former owner is staring at a weeping Everjail, wherein we find imprisoned a former associate of Radagon, who just so happens to be holding an important seal, plucked from the very eye socket of Radagon himself. And behind the church where Radagon's statue resides, we encounter another artist's soul, pointing to Stormveil Castle, where we find a giant visage of Godwyn as the Prince of Death, as well as an omen from the Erd Tree capital, where Radagon awaits us to accept our challenge for the title of Elden Lord. The omen sits peacefully with this hound, who faces only the omen as if they share the typical pet-owner bond, like a good doggy, a leal hound, as Radagon is referred to by Queen Marika. The homing instinct artist points us to Radagon, surrounded by the presence of those who live in death, put there by Godwyn, along with other clues pointing us at the Tombsward Catacombs, where we find Deathroot, also put there by Godwyn, who was supposed to be resurrected during the eclipse, which is the symbol on a shield, held by a corpse just outside the catacombs, staring at an Everjail, wherein a former associate of Radagon's is imprisoned, bearing a seal that ties him directly to Radagon himself. The entire western half of the Weeping Peninsula is filled with references to Radagon that point to Godwyn, that point back to Radagon. The overwhelming evidence surrounding the Church of Pilgrimage makes it abundantly clear that I'm right. Radagon is connected by a trail of obvious breadcrumbs to the death of Godwyn the Golden. I'd like to acknowledge this video by Dryleaf Aaron, part 2 of his amazing series covering his theory that we are Godwyn brought back to life. I don't know if I fully agree with his theory, but his video is well done and very convincing. It convinced me to take another look at the paintings in Limgrave, which led me down a very different path, but I appreciate the inspiration nonetheless. I also appreciate the input of those who commented on my theory when I posted it on the Elden Ring Lore Talk Reddit, especially those who brought up counterpoints, which helped me to eliminate some fluff from my research and follow a clearer path. Comment below to tell me your thoughts, and if you haven't seen my previous video about the connections between Radagon and Loki, please check it out. If you enjoy this video, please click the like button and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.